Welcome to Mind and Mobility, Disability Unfiltered. I'm your host, Camilla S. Thorne, and I'm really glad you're here. Whether you've been here since the mini episodes for my podcast, Disability and Desire, or this is your first time finding my bigger podcast, welcome. This podcast exists because I wanted somewhere real and somewhere comfortable where people with disabilities can come and discuss their lives and really discuss their experiences and maybe feel not so alone. So, and it's not filtered. We're not going to filter anything. We're not going to sugarcoat anything. We're just going to talk about our lives. And that's just really the goal of this space, is to have a space for people to talk about their lives and really what they go through. Stuff like the funny parts, the frustrating parts, the creative parts, and the chaotic everyday, this is just my life parts. There's so many facets to talking about having disabilities and the experience of being somebody that has one, whether it be neurological or physical, or you're just able-bodied and you want to learn more about what it's like to have a disability. Everybody's welcome here. Everybody, can sit down and, have a cup of tea with us and really just talk about life. So really, one thing that I want to start off with is kind of where everything should start, which is who I am, what Disability Unfiltered actually means, and why voice and community matter for the disabled community, why it's important for us to have a voice and to really use it. So let's get into it. For those who don't know me, I'm Camilla. Some people may know me as Sunflower. I live with cerebral palsy, which means my body moves through the world a little differently than most people's. It's a physical disability and it's very visible, so it's not something I can exactly hide. People notice it right away. So it definitely sets the tone for every social interaction I have. And if anybody knows what it's like to have cerebral palsy like that and really kind of try to socialize and understands the experience, pipe up. Let me know what your experience is like, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. So what's really interesting about what happens after that first impression is people tend to assume they already understand what my life looks like based on how my body moves. And that's not true. Like, you wouldn't look at me and think that I can hop on a treadmill every day for an hour and walk 2 miles, which for an able-bodied person may not seem like a lot, but for me, it's huge. So I can do that. That's something that I can physically do every weekday. It's stuff like that where you kind of don't really understand the inner workings of my life, but you assume that you know what I'm about just because you see my physical disability. Now, I don't speak for everybody there. Not everybody's like that, and I understand that. But the vast majority of my experiences in life have been like that. And it's really unfortunate, because that's the kind of thing about having a disability like that, is that people see one part of the picture or the puzzle. They see one little piece of this puzzle and they automatically just assume that's who I am. And like, maybe that I don't have the cognitive ability to communicate with them, or maybe that, that's just kind of who I am and that's all I am. And I don't want it to be a situation where people look at me and they only see my disability. I want people to understand that there's so much more to me than my disability. And in order for me to do that, I feel like having this podcast is going to create that space and create that platform for not only me to speak about my disability and my experiences, but everybody else out there that may feel alone, and everybody else out there that has stories to tell and that may not feel like they have a place to tell them. So that's really important to me. I'm also a writer. I am working on a novel currently. It's a sapphic gothic Highland romantasy, I guess you could call it, which is a lot of words, but those of you who know. So I am working currently on this novel, and it's basically consumed my life in the best way. I really do enjoy writing. It's part of my outlet in life. It's part of like how I process emotions and how I kind of express myself. A lot of myself and my personality goes into my characters. For example, one of my main characters right now, her name is Lily, has cerebral palsy. And the main premise of the book is her taking that cerebral palsy and kind of using it to her advantage because people tend to underestimate her. So she uses it to her advantage to get what she wants in life. And I find that really incredible because it's not a story about inspiration, but it's a story about a woman who has struggles in life, who is taking those struggles and making something out of them to create a better life for herself. And I think that that's really, really important. It's a really important story to tell. So people, that have one view of, say, a physical disability may be able to see it in a different light. So that's part of me as well. I'm a writer. I adopt animals. I have a cat currently. His name is Aspen. He's a sweetheart. He has cerebellar hypoplasia, which is basically the cerebral palsy of the animal kingdom. So cats and dogs typically can get this condition. And it comes about through a virus through the mother, I believe. The mother contracts a virus while she's pregnant with the babies. And because of that virus, the babies come out with cerebellar hypoplasia, which affects their motor skills, like cerebral palsy affects mine. So I adopt animals, I write, I love DIY projects and crafting. I love to put stuff out into the world that really hasn't been out there before. So my imagination tends to move faster than the world around me. And for the longest time, it felt like all of those parts of me were separate. So, for example, there was the disabled version of me, and then there was the writer version of me, the creative version of me, but that's not how it should work. It's not how it really works in real life. They shouldn't be separate. They're all part of me. And, they should not have to be in different categories for people to be able to, accept me for who I am. And the way I move throughout the world with cerebral palsy shapes the way I see the world too. It shapes the stories I tell. Like I said, I'm a writer and, I put a lot of myself into these stories, including, childhood trauma or my life experiences, or like I said, my disability. A lot of myself goes into my writing. It shapes the way I notice things. I'm a very observant person. I notice a lot of things. It shapes my metacognition because, I think about what I think about and I think about that. So it's, I'm a very introspective person. I tend to really overanalyze things and really think about things and my own thoughts and why I'm thinking these things. So it's really shaped who I am as a person. And it's not exactly in the position of like, oh, your cerebral palsy is all you are, but it does affect my life in multiple facets. And I think it's really important to kind of address that. So we're going to talk about what disability unfiltered actually means, because it really matters to kind of address that, what disability unfiltered, the goal of the podcast itself is. Basically in life, there's two extremes to how disability is portrayed. Now you have the clinical side, which is the side where they talk about the symptoms and the physical toll of the body and all the medical jargon and the terms. And then on the other side, there's the inspiration, and everything on TV made to be inspirational for those that maybe don't have a disability to kind of feel good. So that's two sides of the spectrum. Now, what Disability Unfiltered is somewhere where we can talk about everything in between all of that and that. So it's a space for everybody who has a disability to really kind of open up and be yourself and talk about your experiences without having to worry about outside perceptions, because we're all accepting here. We should all be accepting here. And I just really want us to have a good time and find community with each other. It's important. I guess is what I'm saying is I want us to have the full picture. So sometimes having a disability is funny, it's exhausting, empowering. Sometimes it's just Tuesday, it's just normal. Uh, Unfiltered basically means I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. I'm not going to smooth it out for anybody or make it more digestible, because the reality of it is this is our life and this is what we experience. So why would I try to make it easier for you to swallow when you're not the one that has to experience it? And some may think, oh, that comes off really aggressive. Well, I mean, honestly, I haven't been heard throughout my life. So this is my point in time to be heard. And if it comes off aggressive to you, I'm sorry, but at the same time, I'm ready to be heard. And I don't want anybody else talking over me and telling me what my experience is. So, I'm going to say what I have to say, and I don't care if anybody thinks it's aggressive or too much. I'm not going to clean it up, that's my point. I'm not going to clean it up and make it more digestible for people. I'm not going to shrink myself. I'm not going to make it more comfortable. So it just gets to be what it is. And that's one of the main missions. So voice, that's important. And I believe I've touched on this a couple times now that I've, been talking about it. I want everybody who feels like they don't have a voice, who feels like they don't have anybody or can't relate to anybody or nobody understands them, to have a voice or to listen to a voice that maybe does. Because there's been a lot of times in my life where I have felt nobody truly understands me or my experience. I have friends and family that love me, that care for me, that support me like anybody else. And I am so grateful for them, and I love them, and they're fantastic. But when it comes down to it, they don't understand what my life experience is. They don't understand my lived experience. Just like in their lives, there's stuff that I don't understand about them. So I think it's really important for us to have this space as people with disabilities to be able to kind of offload our problems or our grievances with the world, as far as like accessibility goes, or social interactions, things like that. Just, whatever may be irking you as a person or whatever you feel like you want to talk about, this is the space for it. So even when people's intentions were good, like oftentimes people with disabilities, their stories have been told through people that don't actually experience it, like doctors or family members or researchers, caregivers, journalists, you name it, it's been talked about by these people that maybe haven't experienced it firsthand, at least. And while their intentions were good, something still kind of gets lost when you're not the one actually inside the experience. You don't really get the full picture there. And I really want to change that. Like I said, I want to step up and kind of say, this is my life in my words. And I want other people to be able to step up and have the courage and say, this is my life. This is what I go through. This is, my words. So I really think that's why it matters so much to me, is because a lot of people with disabilities have been kind of stripped of that voice, stripped of that ability to talk about their experiences. So I want to give that back. I really do. Not just for me, but for everybody else. It's very important to me. I know what it feels like to be the only one in the room that understands exactly what I go through. Like I know what that feels like. And it sucks because you go through your whole life typically. And I'm not saying, again, this is not everybody's experience, but the majority of experience, from what I've heard from other people, says, not everybody who is around me understands my experience. And a lot of people haven't had the opportunity to meet people maybe with the same conditions that they have and really feel understood on that deeper level. It's the isolation is sometimes is the hardest part. Not just the physical or the neurological or mental part. It's definitely the isolation of like not having anybody, and also when it comes to social interactions, being underestimated and assumed things of. So that creates a sense of isolation where you just really feel alone and you kind of feel slightly off map from everybody else, if that makes sense. But then one day something shifts. Like for me personally, it was social media and seeing like people up on stage that have cerebral palsy and do their comedy shows and comedy bits. And there's people that are on TikTok that do videos about their disabilities and stuff. So that kind of really kicked things off for me, where I thought, man, there's this huge gap within the community where there's really not a lot of spaces for people to really talk about their disabilities and be open about things and really kind of just lay it all out there. So for somebody else, it might be like finding someone online or a book or maybe a conversation or a community. And then like suddenly you realize it's not just me. So it really does change everything when you have a community to kind of bounce things off of or talk about things with. It can it just really can change your perspective on yourself and the world. And it really does make a world of difference. So that's what I want this space to be. Not just an audience, but like a community. For able-bodied and disabled people to kind of get together and get to know each other and really understand what we go through on a daily basis. I don't want people to kind of have to filter themselves, I guess is my point. I don't want people to have to constantly explain their own existence. Because being understood makes the world of difference. It really does. So at least in my experience. This has been the first episode, and as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a question. When was the first time you truly felt understood? Maybe it was a person, maybe it was a space, or maybe you're still looking for that. Really, if you got an answer, I'd love to hear it. You can find me on TikTok at camilla.s.thorn.author, where I'll be sharing updates on the podcast, my writing, and everything else I'm building. Go ahead and shoot me a DM if you have like a story or if you have an answer to that question that you'd like to discuss with me. Because I'd really love to talk to you about maybe being featured on the podcast or maybe featuring your story if you're comfortable with that. But if you're not and you just want somebody to share your story with, go ahead. Shoot me a DM. I'm happy to discuss with you your life experiences and really we can talk about, whatever you want to talk about. So, the space, just know this space is meant to be ours. So really, if you're here for this and you really want to be part of this community, stick around, give me a follow, give me a like, share this video to your friends. Really, we need to start kind of pushing things like this out there so that, everybody can have access to it and everybody knows it exists so they don't feel so alone. So if you could go ahead and do that for me, give me a like, give me a follow, or, share my video or repost, that would make a world of difference. And I really would appreciate you for it. Thanks for being here. It really means a lot to me. Until next time, keep creating, keep questioning, keep taking up space. Your voice matters.